Hi everyone, welcome to our podcast. Really appreciate you being here. I hope you've been getting some great insight and knowledge from the podcast we've been putting out so far. Really keen to give back to the community. So thank you so much for tuning in. This week, really pleased to be speaking to Stuart Hirst. Stuart Hirst is the CISO of Trustpilot. I briefly met, if you will, many years ago when I was working for another company and worked with another Stu who will be on a podcast soon at the Brewdog Wings Wednesday, I think just before an awards that you were going to when you were working with Just Eat, but I don't know how I remember that, probably because of the food. Um, but yeah, over the years I've been out and about doing different things and now kind of coming back in, just keen to, have a chat with CISO. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on this podcast and giving us your time.
No problem. No, great to be here and to speak to you. Yeah, I don't particularly remember the Wings Wednesday, but I certainly know Stu Peck well.
Yeah, I think everyone does. And yeah, I was very lucky enough to work with him and just be kind of alongside him working with different people. Um, so yeah, over that kind of period of time, like I've been out of the game a little bit. Now kind of come back working with Pendas people and we're doing these podcasts speaking to CISOs. Really keen to really get your thoughts around, what's been happening in cybersecurity the last few years. Where do you think it's going to go? Um, Really keen just to get your thoughts really.
Yeah, look, I guess it's one of those fields that changes so quickly for all of us. If you spend a few years out of it and you come back, it's probably reasonably different to a certain extent. For me personally, I mean, I guess I've been on a bit of a journey over 10, 12, 13 years that I've been in InfoSec now, from starting out in compliance and as an analyst and then through various roles with tech companies, ending up with things like head of cloud security at Just Eat, and then onto the role that I've got now, which is the CISO at Trustpilot, which I'm 3 years into. What have I seen change over that time? I mean, just the rapid adoption of technology further than it already had been, 10 years ago. Um, for me personally, I've been very heavily involved in cloud environments, but that the pace of that has continued to accelerate. Um, I noted down some things to talk about on this topic earlier on, and just the attack surface, right? The way that the Internet of Things developed and continued global adoption of the internet beyond what it was even 10 years ago. You've got these sort of raft of things that have continued to grow at pace. Um, the job certainly doesn't get any easier, I don't think, for the amount of things we have to take care of now. So I think back to some of those, I guess, early days, if you like, of my security career. It's very much physical server related for me. So sort of patching, physical servers in data centers and data centers that companies owned. Um, Not very much in the way of real forward-thinking endpoint protection or I just remember the tooling being very sort of basic compared to what we have now. So I think all of these kind of areas of infosec have just grown and grown over the years, and now we've got this landscape of cloud first technologies, thousands of SaaS platforms out there, of which I work for one. A truly global internet now compared to a decade ago, and then just that attack surface piece where nearly everything's connected to the internet these days, so it just widens that whole scope even further. Um, so just that rapid adoption of those technologies has been the main thing that I feel has shifted. From a role point of view, I mean, I suppose, as I said, I've been in varying roles in different companies, and I've gone on a bit of a journey on that, from in the weeds of technical things and incident response or SecOps through to infrastructure cloud, and now it's 3 years at a CISO role, which has been far more strategic and business impacting, perhaps compared to some of those previous roles. So yeah, lots of change.
Lots of change for you, lots of change for the industry. I remember people talking to people around, or have been talking to people recently around, um, just the mass adoption of technology and how it's become a bit of kind of like technology fatigue, if you will. There's so many different SaaS products out there. I'm part of a community of commercial leaders, and when we meet, we talk around the SaaS industry, how that's going, what's happened, the impact, and it's starting to kind of get such a mature market, and the way that it's worked is kind of consuming itself a little bit, because all of these tech businesses are all owned or invested in by certain VCs, and they're all working together, and it all becomes a little bit of a bit mad, and it's kind of technology for technology's sake sometimes. But it must be really tough to, especially from your role and actually the roles you worked in, decide the right things to work with, build the right things, and trying to navigate that whole landscape from a technology perspective, but then also from a personal perspective, having growing into the role and going up into a CISO role. It's a big step, and it's a big change from the technical conversations into more business like conversations, um where
Yeah.
we're having to think about what's important to the business versus I'm super passionate about this, and I'm super techie, but actually you've got to find that balance between um technology, security, and the kind of the business's main drivers.
Yeah, and I think my learnings from the CISO role over the 3 years have been like my connection to commercial at Trustpilot, for instance, is huge, right? So security is really embedded into the product, which is a sellable thing right on the market,
Yeah.
and the security of that drives adoption of the product, which is it's the whole point of the product in the first place. But my impact to that is way beyond what I would have had in previous companies. So the maturity of what we're building out from a security point of view has this really tangible, financial impact. It's not just about reducing risk for me, which is one of the most overriding things that we do. And I think I've had to learn way more about just how business works compared to, I was bit of a cliche, right? With security people, we're focused on that as a thing, but a lot of the work that I get involved in has this impact to these other areas, and drives maturity in those other areas beyond what I've done previously. So I've had to really get to grips with how a business really functions. That's probably been one of the steep learning curves. I suppose one of the other things is, I think you mentioned it in the comment there around, yes, it's knowing what to do, right? Whatever those impacts or drivers are, but it's also deciding what not to do. I've got 100 things I need to fix or drive forward, and I'm only going to do 5 of those this quarter or 10 or whatever the thing is. So you've got to get really good at prioritizing and being able to explain to stakeholders why you're not doing a whole raft of other things, and then being comfortable removing yourself from those things and just deciding not to do them.
Yeah.
And you accept
Yeah.
risk because of that. You accept that you're not going to progress on some things that are still important. You've got to get comfortable with that.
Finding the balance. I do some coaching, mentoring for people earlier on today, actually talking around like kind of when you get into a function or a lead role within a function, like it's normally your big focus is everything within that. You got to then prioritize what's important for you. But then it's as you start getting to say like a C level or a VP kind of level in a business, you start interacting with other departments, is actually understanding what your impact has on that department and how to work with them and what's important to them and what language they use. So a whole learning curve must have kind of really come on at that stage. And I'd love to know probably later on as we go into the segment of kind of advice of what you give to people who want to be CISOs in the future. But there must have been a real big change for you that you've either leaned on people, your experience, or resources to help you kind of really make that shift. But it's quite an exciting, it's quite an exciting role. So this first CISO role for yourself.
I mean, I sort of stepped into the CISO role at Just Eat for a little while, as things changed there. So I guess not my first kind of top level role, but yeah, certainly one that I've been able to build out from scratch and build a team. I joined just before Trustpilot IPO'd, so kind of became a public company with everything that entailed. I think one of the things that hits home is there's not a playbook for any of this kind of thing, right? And yeah, CISOs talk to each other, and security people engage quite heavily at events and things. But I've had to kind of just learn on the job, frankly, in pretty much all aspects of it. Even board engagement, sure, you can watch some talks or read some blogs on those things, but it's just in the doing sometimes that you get to feel your way through it, and like everything, sort of screw it up and go again, and and try and make it better next time. It's not an exact science, so
Yeah.
I think that's been a pretty steep learning curve in these 3 years.
It must come with the territory, right? Because you think about cyber, there's always new threats, there's always new things coming up, there's always new technologies. You're always having to think on your feet. And I laughed a little bit because obviously from a sales background, the SaaS sales playbook is out there on a million and one different places. So many different people use it and interpret in different ways. But talking to Hazel and obviously, so the other week, she was saying like it's kind of like you're kind of making up as you go along in a sense. Like there's no guidebook, there is no playbook. It is you got to do the best you can, but actually probably having that experience of constantly having to figure out what to do next when you're really only kind of reacting upon someone else or you're trying to think ahead of somebody
Yeah.
else. Yeah, it's quite interesting that as the industry evolves. When I first got into this, it was just IT directors, then cyber information security, then cyber come along, and it's very evolving. And I'd be interested at some point if someone does bring out a playbook or something that a lot of people follow. But I think as soon as that's out, the next day it's irrelevant because so much would have changed within that time frame. So
And every business obviously has those different complexities within it. So even things that you take from job to job tend to be quite different anyway. Things that you've tried in previous organizations sometimes just don't work, and you've got to pivot. I've been saying this to my team a lot over the last couple of years, that you've got to get comfortable with changing your mind on things for the shifts that happen in threats or in risk, or just commercial decisions. I've done that myself on various issues over the years, and had to get comfortable with what you might read something I said 6 7 years ago is now wildly different, because of the roles that I've found myself in. I guess that's just how it is. I find it really difficult to keep up with things, frankly. I'm sure every security professional does. Ever changing threat actors, and risk postures changing pretty much daily. New technologies, yeah, it's just never ending.
I guess the only
I've,
stability knowing that it is constant change.
Yeah, and then I suppose I'm not as technical as I used to be. I don't know how technical I ever was, but I'm certainly not in the weeds of as much of it anymore. I try to be, but again, there's only so many hours in the day to be all over that. Whereas if I look back to my time at Just Eat, it was very heavily cloud security, so I was kind of right in the weeds of AWS and GCP. And now I tend to be at a more strategic level, trying to figure out the longer term plans. If I look back, even 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to strategize security particularly competently. I think again, but again, that's just something I've had to learn on the job. And now I'm getting to the point where I can do sort of multi-year, high-level plans of where everything's kind of leading to. Um, yeah, it's learning by doing.
Yeah, and then I guess sharing and speaking with others as well. I think that's one big thing that the community has improved on over the years. I think there's still some way to go, but a lot of people share a lot of what they're doing. I've been fortunate enough to work with CISOs where they'll show me their 18-month, 3-year, 5-year plan that you then share with insurers and the like, where you do have that vision of, okay, it's not just getting in there and doing it. This is what we're going to do, and I'd love to get to here, but it's going to take steps along that journey to build out what we need within the function around people, process, and technology. So yeah, it seemed like it's always an exciting role. There's always something that you've got to keep going with, and there's always more to focus on. So on that kind of future thinking side, where obviously you have your plan in the business and you would taken into consideration external impacts and the like, but just from an industry's perspective, where do you see things going? Is there any sort of trends, anything that you think will develop over the years that is not quite there yet?
Yeah, I'll address the one that I've been in for years, which I still think is being adopted, which is cloud. And I think for those of us that work at tech companies who are sort of all in on running in cloud, we probably take it for granted
Hmm.
that the world has got there, and it hasn't. Right? I suppose I still talk to a lot of organizations that are finding their way into that realm. So I still think that's going to continue to be a big thing. We've been running out of cloud for 10 plus years now, but I still think there's quite a long way to go um, for that technology. And then I guess the one that every single podcast is talking about and everybody in the industry is talking about is just AI. Um, the threats to AI, the change that it might make for businesses, for society, right? So it's not just the companies that we're working for; it's society at large. You'll probably get a different answer from each security person you speak to because we all have different levels of engagement with it at the moment. I can't say that I'm an absolutely staggering uber expert on all things AI at the moment, but I'm feeling my way through what some of the impact might be and what some of the risks to using it might be.
Hmm.
Um, we naturally sort of fall into this realm of talking about risk with new technologies, but of course there'll be positives from it, right? You know, Embedding into the product sets that we use, and some of the tooling that we leverage. I put a thing on LinkedIn about AI the other day, and ended up with about 50 DMs within a day of kind of people trying to sell me things relating to to AI and cyber. So it's clearly
The
the buzz
amount,
term at the moment.
yeah, the amount of tools that have AI, and I'm in and around the incubators for the banks and stuff like that. And yeah, everyone's product now has AI on it, and that it's the new buzzword that people are jumping on. But with any emerging technology, there will be new people that are doing certain things that are great, some people not so much, and then there'll always be risks and kind of threats on that. We were having a conversation the other day with someone around, even from us as a testing company, like how do you use generative AI within the business to help improve certain processes, certain workflows. Obviously not replacing the tester, but how do you kind of like bulk things onto that, and the products that you have, how do you include Gen AI into it? We're also talking to companies around how when they're developing AI tools, or they are bringing on AI tools, how do we make sure that that's secure as well? Because some little bit of data or something, I think there was a story the other day where with an airline that a chatbot got kind of manipulated to go and do certain things. And these sort of areas, like these new technologies, how do we make sure they're not breakable, and that if we're adopting them, that we can make sure that we've got a bit of a either layer separation, or that we making sure that's as secure as it can be as well. And it's a
Yeah.
big thing that's impacting every industry, every job really.
My approach to Trustpilot using AI tools so far is actually no different from using any other SaaS platform. It's been, what data are we sharing with those companies, and how are they protecting it? I mean, we can go down these realms of talking about large language models being, hacked, and kind of, some real deep technical stuff, but it's still the same for me. It's, we potentially are sharing a lot of data with a third party, and we've no real idea how they're protecting it. Um, Even if we go back sort of a year ago when Chat GPT and things were coming out, I mean, you could put an entire code base in there if you wanted to, or reams of very, very personal, sensitive information without really knowing what they're doing with it. So I think we talk a lot in security about basics, but there's still a basic element to, you're engaging with a third party and using a third party tool, and you're sharing lots of data with it. Almost certainly, how much control do you have over that? How much visibility do you have? Are your employees following policies that try and keep it to a certain standard? That there's a lot of that basic stuff to get right first before you chuck everything at it. And then of course you're going to get into the weeds of the more niche things as we start to adopt it more rapidly. And I was talking to somebody a few days ago about my views on what will come next, and I think it'll be the same as any other major technology adoption, and that we'll all rush to these things, right? And we'll all kind of use them without really considering it. And then there'll be a major incident. I mean, there's probably been some already, but there'll be an industry impacting very difficult incident, either across multiple companies or the industry as a whole, some huge vulnerability or the like, and it'll make us backtrack and step back a little bit and go, hang on, we probably should have a little bit more diligence. So I sort of battle with these two ideas of rushing towards new technology, because that's what we do as companies and as people, and that's great, and that's all about disruption and moving tech forward. But something bad will happen. It's happened in cloud. It's happened in any major technology shift over the decades. So I think brace for that eventuality and watch this back. And I'm sure in a year, unfortunately, it will have happened. But that will be the thing that sort of forces us into taking a bit more action and considering it a little bit more. And then I'm sure there'll be compliance frameworks that come down there'll be the same
Regulation
path
will
that we've
jump
gone
on
down.
when
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's always an argument as to how deep that has to go and how much of that there has to be, but there'll be a standard, right? It'll fit into NIST or something, or
yeah,
there'll be
a version of, won't there, that will come out just to cover that new technology, and
yeah,
we'll be onto the next thing, or the evolution of that technology as well. So it's really
yeah.
interesting. Anything outside of AI that that you're kind of predicting or kind of seeing trending towards in the future in the industry?
Um,
Maybe it doesn't have to be technology. It can be like people. It can be other bits and that around that sort of area.
I think you're just going to see more of the same. You're seeing sophisticated attacks. The level of sophistication, ramps up every year, at the various levels. AI is obviously going to play a part in that, where phishing, deep fakes, whatever, will just become far more convincing. Um, I think I'm seeing a consolidation into a lot of tooling these days. I mean, there's a hell of a lot of tools out on the market doing great stuff, but perhaps we've sort of diluted the space a little bit on that. I'm certainly leveraging a little bit more, consolidation of tooling to try and get a bit more value out of those things. So it'll be interesting to see how much more of that happens. What else? Yeah, I don't see anything kind of radical, certainly in the short term that we're aware of, unless there's kind of some major global attack or something that happens that just pivots us a little bit, shifts us to thinking a bit differently. Whether that's kind of an energy grid or something hugely impactful. I guess the powers that be keep suggesting that there's something that might at that level that might happen. I think we should probably get our heads around the idea that it's possible.
Of some conversation before the madness of being stuck in the house for a couple of years. There's a lot of in my business course a while back, they always taught us about VUCA environment, which is like it's volatile, it's uncertain, it's just getting used to the fact that that's the way it is now, and just how you then react to things to either try and be ahead of or be comfortable with it, and you're saying yes to the right things and saying no to the things that don't need the focus on. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go on to your main topic now. So we had a bit of a discussion beforehand. We're really keen to learn a little bit more about your CISO journey overall. You've given a bit of a brief already, and then also around like how to build out teams. So have you always built out teams in the different kind of roles you had? Is it kind of evolved over the time? I'd love to kind of dive into that topic of choice for you.
Yeah, sure. So I guess Scanner was the first time I tried to build out a team. That was 10 years ago now, or coming up on 10 years when I started there. I didn't really quite understand the structure of what a good security team would look like. Focused mainly on SecOps as a starter for 10. If you don't have visibility into things, then how do you know what's going on? I kind of did the same thing here at Trustpilot with the way I've scaled that out. I think as I said before, each business is different, so it has subtly different needs. So when you're scaling out teams and looking to build out teams, it's always with that in mind. Um, at the moment, I have teams in SecOps, I have risk and governance, and then I've combined AppSec and CloudSec into a platform security team. And the reason I did that was because when we were looking at overlapping work between AppSec and CloudSec, it's all code, right? So whether you're building infrastructure as code in cloud, or the actual code of the product, it's all code, right? So we were finding that we were sort of having subtly duplicated work across those two streams. So we've combined it. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect model, but it also allows the people in that team to cross skill in different things. So if you're a cloud security engineer, you can get into a bit of AppSec and a bit more of the AppSec side of things. So
That's nice.
I've tried to sort of shift as the years have gone on, really, and not just follow a defined pattern or course that I've went on before.
That's nice. That's interesting. It comes back to one of the question I really want to ask. Really, you on the kind of brief around the topic we're going to talk about, you've kind of talked about the CISO journey, gain the knowledge and experience to get there, and then stay there. I think that's it's a really kind of interesting point I'd love to dive into, because a lot of CISOs, there's typically called like a CISO shelf life, right? Like there's a certain amount of time you're in a project, 18 months, 3 years, kind of you're there to drive change. You'll go through different ups and downs. I think that's quite an important thing to cover for our listeners, is how to get to that point, and then how to stay there. And I'm guessing it will be different for different businesses whether or not staying there is right, or maybe for different people, because some people like to go build and change and then kind of leave and then go and do something different. But yeah, I'd love to dive into that comment a little bit more.
Yeah, when when things changed at Just Eat and the CISO left there, which you've had on the podcast before, Kevin, there was an opportunity for me to apply for that role, and I actually spent quite a number of weeks talking to my wife, talking to my family about, is this the right thing to do? Right. I really loved working in cloud security. I built a team out there, and as I said, I was in the technical stuff enough to kind of really enthused by that part of it. So I spent quite a long time considering whether a CISO role, or the highest up in the business, was kind of the right thing to do. So I went into it eyes open. Um, and the same, accepting the Trustpilot role, I kind of I suggested to them, to the people I was speaking to at the time, that it was a 4-year plan, probably, to get the company where it needed to be from a security point of view. Whether that was me or somebody else, these are the things I thought it needed. I would say largely the CISO role has been what I expected, again, because I spoke to a lot of people and worked with numerous other CISOs for a good few years. So I've seen a bit of everything. I don't think there's an exact way to get into that role, right? I think I've been quite fortunate in that my experience over the 10, 12 years has been a bit of all of those things. It's been compliance, it's been SecOps, it's been infrastructure, it's been cloud, it's been risk. I felt like going into it, I had enough of a breadth of knowledge across those areas.
Hmm.
I miss the technical stuff, right? That's always going to be a bit of a balance of taking on these kind of roles. Or as I built out the team, I've had to remove myself from more technical work. But
Yeah.
then at the same time, I do work now that's so strategically aligned with the company and the company strategy and the company goals, that I feel like my impact is actually really big, right? So there's a motivating factor to doing that kind of work as well, and that's quite addictive, to be frank.
Is it kind
In
of
terms of
taking
staying
over
there,
the
sorry.
passion? And I was going to say maybe taking over the passion of the technical side of things, right? Because I can imagine you, you as you're trying to step away, you're really keen and passionate and you're wanting to do that. But actually, if you can then find a challenge that is stimulating and is addictive, then then that kind of like swaps one for the other. It's just part of your journey, isn't it?
Yeah, when you start, as I said at the start of the chat, when you get into the commercial side of things, where you're what your team is doing affects the bottom line of the business, you start to see the impact that has to the company, right? So helping drive growth of the company, that employs people, there's a lot of kickback to that work. It's not just vulnerability or risk. So that's a side of it I hadn't really seen before. And again, that becomes a really sort of powerful thing to be part of, where you feel like you're making that level of change, and therefore your influence and your impact is at that level. And I guess CISOs tend to not still sit in the C-suite yet, but it feels like my impact is comparable to a certain extent. So that's enjoyable, right? I think you mentioned the tenure of CISOs is 18 months, 2 years. So I'm not entirely sure why that is, to be honest. But I'm 3 years in. It's been fantastic. It feels like I've been here a fairly short period of time, and there's still a hell of a lot of great work to do. So yeah, let's get to the next stages and see what else there is to do. I think as long as I'm in roles that are challenging, you're learning, you're working with great people. I'm very lucky to work for companies that I love the product. I love the kind of the vision of the company. I'm really fortunate to be in one for the last 3 years that really aligns to my values as an individual.
Mm.
Yeah, it's just that kind of package of things. But if I had advice for anybody kind of looking to make the shift, is yeah, just speak to people, right? Speak to other CISOs, get advice on what it's actually like, because there'll be parts of it that probably surprise you that might not be for you. But I think as long as you can gather that information, and then if you're ready to make the leap, and I think we talked at the start of you're going to have to just make some of this stuff up as you go, frankly, because there is no nice shiny piece of paper that tells you how to do it.
Yeah, I think, and it also, like, I think you're quite lucky in the sense that when whether it's intentional luck or kind of accidental, and maybe this isn't an older way of thinking, but when we used to do like virtual CISOs and the like, you talk to CISOs, you'd you'd look at it and there's like 4 or 5 pillars. They come from like an infrastructure background or a governance or something like that. Like there'll be different areas that they'll come from. They'll have a real passion for one, and they'll start learning other areas. But it's not like you're never the finished article. And I think maybe that's part of the answer to the thing that I'm quite curious around is like, how to stay in a CISO role, because I've seen people go and come into one, move and then to another one, is to then, continue learning and continue developing. And like the world is changing. We're kind of fortunate enough that there's so much going on. New things are coming out all the time, that you put a 3-year strategy together, 4-year, 5-year strategy. Halfway through, you've got to change that. Probably half
Yeah.
of the way through the year, you've got to change little bits around it. So it's becoming more of a challenge, and for people who want to solve problems, I'm guessing is probably that's the skill set you need to really have behind that, is to be passionate about solving problems and be able to communicate, kind of technical language and security talk into business and vice versa.
Yeah, and I don't think you can um you can't stay still, right, as a CISO in certainly in the tech world. It changes so fast that you've got to adapt to it, right? And you've got to be learning all the time. You've got to invest the time and energy in all of that. I feel like if you kind of just sit for 6 months and don't do some of that work, that you do get left behind a little bit, and that's a motivating factor as well. And it all moves fast. I do some crypto advisory because it's fascinating, but also because I don't want to feel like I'm leaving some of that technology, not behind, but that I'm kind of missing it as I get older and it's kind of passing me by. So yeah, I chuck myself into a few things just to keep that knowledge up and try and keep learning. But I never feel on top of it. I think that's probably quite common across most of us, whether it's CISOs or frankly anybody in security.
Yeah. But I guess like the passion behind it, I was talking to someone the other day, they were saying like gift, passion and service, like you're going to be really good at delivering a service if you have a gift at something or you're super passionate about it. So actually this is like the right environment for you to then to be able to be good at what you do, just because you have the ingredients that mean that you can get to a CISO role and stay in that role. And you know I don't know if you're looking to progress any further and stuff like that, probably not the conversation here, but um it's ever evolving as a role, so keeps it more
I,
more
I,
interesting.
I think there's a debate still about where do CISOs go from there.
Yeah. And where does the role go as
What
well, right? So is that role going to change
yeah,
to something else at some point? Would it go back into risk? Where would it go?
do CISOs move into sort of CIOs, CTOs maybe? There's options there for progression. Um, Obviously to different industries and things, and different size companies, but um, yeah, there's a debate to be had around kind of what next for CISOs once they've done that job for a period of time. Where would they naturally progress to if there is somewhere else to progress to? Or yeah, interesting times.
Yeah. One of the bits that you mentioned is how to strategize and build out teams. Have you got any advice for listeners around like how to really effectively build out teams? I know it's like try as you go along. I think that's obviously a really good bit of advice, but anything else that you'd like to share?
Yeah, the way I've done it at Trustpilot is there are competing pressures, right? There's commercial pressure, there's board and exec level pressure, and then there's hacker pressure, the threat side of things. So we work around risk, as one of the fundamentals is, what are the risks to the business and what's the maturity level of the controls around those risks or the visibility of our estate. Um, that would be my advice to anybody going into a new company is once you can get your head around the risk side of things, you can understand where your maturity lies and therefore kind of what you're missing. I built the team from scratch at Trustpilot. So my first focus was on SecOps. What I mentioned earlier was if I can't see things happening, how do I know where to focus efforts? It's guesswork. So built out SecOps, but then as you start to build out the other parts of the team, it's based on business priorities and some of the natural maturity of the company. But what I do for the team is I have those three functions. I have platform security, SecOps, and then risk and governance. Is I set three goals per year for those teams, and they're quite wide. They're quite loose, but it aligns to those risks. So each goal fundamentally reduces a risk for the business. But the goals are wide enough that when the teams come to do their quarterly OKRs, they have autonomy to decide what those OKRs are, as long as they fit into those high level goals. So, I'll give you an example. What the top goal for my platform security team is to automate our vulnerability management. Now, that's quite a wide term, right? There's a hell of a lot you could shoehorn into that.
Yeah.
But what it does is allow them each quarter to decide the right things to be doing and the most impactful things to be doing to get further to that goal. And there's no end point to some of those goals. They're just a continuing maturity path.
Yeah.
But what it does is quite a powerful way of building teams and building work because when there's 100 things to fix, it brings them back into this notion of risk and impact. Is this the most impactful thing I can be doing to reduce that risk, or to respond to a threat, maybe, or something that we've had to pivot on? And if the answer is no, well, don't do it. Simple as that. You've got to pick the impactful things, and it just keeps us in a really nice rhythm of how we plan and deliver work.
It
So
empowers
that I mean that
people as well, right? That you've given them a talking to someone someone who runs some cyber teams at Meta, an advisor on some projects we did before, but he was saying like, have a North Star, everything's kind of built from the ground up. If you give people a bit of a direction and not kind of telling them the answer, you can see wonders coming out of the things that they're doing, but also like they're really empowered, they're really motivated, and what
yeah.
they're building and doing is what they believe in and they're passionate about, versus you kind of mandating do this, do this, do this, which is obviously quite restricting.
And that, I don't think that fundamentally works anyway. Like micromanagement tends to be quite restrictive and not great leadership. So I found that this is a model that's worked for me across a couple of companies now, where it's a nice balance between me giving direction and me giving where we're heading to, which I then justify at the exec level and the board level,
Mm.
but it then gives the teams the autonomy and the freedom to decide how to get there, what to build, what to focus on. they're the technical ones. They're the ones with the expertise in those areas, and then I tend to either support it or challenge it as necessary, but to tend to support it, and then that comes with supporting it from a budget point of view or a people point of view, or navigate some of the prioritization of those things. So it's not an exact science of how to go about planning work, but it's as coherent a way as I've found in my career. And as you said, it tends to lead to motivated, happy teams because they feel like they're in control of what they're doing, and they're not just being dictated to all the time. But again, that comes with I need to stay on top of things, at a certain level to understand what those goals are, right? What are the maturity paths we need to be hitting? What are the risks that we may or may not be? Are we missing something? Is there something happening in the industry that I'm not on top of? Because if I don't get that bit right, then we end up going down perhaps the wrong path. So yeah, that's kind of I should really do a whole talk on it at some point of just how that's worked for me and how that's led to the building of the team and the work that we deliver.
I think it's really, yeah, really important for people to learn from other people. One question I've been floating around in the background of, have you been learning from people as well, like to kind of get you to where you are, and kind of any advice for people, who are on that journey?
Yeah, massively. So I go to events, watch talks, run events myself. I'm in a WhatsApp group with 50 other security people. Social media, LinkedIn, all of those platforms to learn from people. I try and absorb as much as I can. I mean, it's the only way to do it, right? Is to chuck yourself into listening to all these other people. I created the Cloud Security Forum in 2017. It's got about 2,500 of the world's leading cloud security people, and I read it as often as I can, or some of the topics. And it's just amazing, right? It's just people sharing information, collaborating on learnings, driving the whole thing forward. So yeah, my advice on that, not just to CISOs or potential CISOs, is you've got to chuck yourself into as many things as you can to get that information.
Yeah.
And I think we're quite open in security. We share a lot. We probably overshare for such a sensitive thing, but we share learnings because it's the only way that other people can understand what to do. I'm actually probably not as prevalent as I may have been a few years ago. I've got young family and all of those life things. So I used to kind of get to a lot more events and travel a lot more than I probably do now. But I still try and keep close to it.
Yeah. What's the most exciting thing, or yeah, maybe what's the most exciting thing about being a CISO for you, or for the journey?
Um, yeah, I mean, there's probably two bits, right? So it's that impact to the company and seeing how much influence you have and how much progression you can actually help the whole company with. And then it's really just progressing people's careers. There's nothing nicer for me than having teams of really smart people who you can help them on their journey and see them progress and learn and become the next whatever they want to be. I think there's a real motivating kickback to that. I mean, that's just leadership in general, right? But being able to bring people on their career journey is a really nice thing to be a part of. I think just the industry in general as well, and just to play a tiny part in in an industry moving at pace, and trying to share some of that, give some of that back. I think is super motivating.
Yeah, love how that whole community comes together in many walks of life, right? I owe a lot of my luck and my learnings to some communities I've been part of from like a commercial leadership perspective. Like, wouldn't have been able to see that or expose myself to that before. Now
Mm,
the world's become bigger, but also quite small, because you can be parts of the communities of people you've never ever met, but learn and grow so much as an individual. There's so much knowledge out there, and everyone seems to want to help each other, which is nice.
yeah,
Like I feel like when I started the career, it was very much the opposite way of that. It felt like, someone once posted to be successful, but then don't tell anyone how you got there. But now it's like, become successful and then teach other people, because then the world's evolving so much. What we did 10 years ago is not going to work again now. So we need to share that
yeah.
that information more and more. So hopefully these podcasts are going to help to add to that, as well as some of the other community
Absolutely.
stuff that we're doing. We tend to end up on advice for people coming into this, but we've already covered that, so not much to go into it. But yeah, unless you wanted to cover anything else, yeah, I just want to say a massive thank you for coming into a podcast and giving me some time, giving us some time to, have a bit of a chat around your journey, how to get there, to stay there. I think it's really interesting, and to build teams, because if you've never done it before, it can be a real daunting task.
Yeah, awesome. No, it's been great to chat. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Thank you so much.